So this week we come across a game that was recommended that I buy because of some seriously negative Steam forum posts, and for the fact that it was 99 cents. Shit, even I can afford that. Anyway, so I played it and kept an open mind, and to introduce the game, it really isn't as bad as its reputation might make it seem. The title is Space Trader, Merchant Marine. You play as a newly licensed trader in space. I know, no shit, right? Never would have figured that one out. Anyway, you play through 5 different chapters, trying to make as much money as possible to pay off debts, and to create your own trading network. Don't try to wrap your head too much around the story. It's mediocre at best, and that's kind of being generous. The storyline isn't really fleshed out much, and each chapter, although picking up where the last one stopped, always starts you off with minimal starting budget, no matter how far ahead you got in the previous chapter. Before actually talking about the gameplay, I'll go ahead and give you the rundown of each chapter. If you're one of those people that don't want to listen to spoilers, even though there's not really much to spoil as you're just a freaking trader, but go ahead and skip ahead for about maybe 45 seconds or so if you really don't want to know what the 5 chapters are about. The first chapter involves you trying to secure a trading ship. In order to do so, you just need to find a contact that can lend you one. Chapter 2 starts you with getting a mechanic, and in order to pay back for your ship, you need to round up $1.5 million. With Chapter 3, you have to find someone to disarm a bomb on your trading ship. For Chapter 4, which is the absolute easiest, you have to find a replacement part for your ship just by bouncing between a few of the other ships in your convoy. It's a pathetic excuse for a chapter, and one that takes less than 15 minutes to complete. Finally, Chapter 5 is the final step to becoming a master trader, in which you just need to accumulate $30 million. Now, each chapter may have its own real objective, but the story overall is that you're just trying to become the most famous trader known to man. So, how do you do so? Well, there's 2 main parts of the game. You have your trading and you have your bounty hunting. I'll talk about the trading first. Each chapter has a set of planets that you can travel to. Traveling does take time though. Basically, each chapter gives you a set time limit to complete it. This time limit is measured in hours, and these hours are only really consumed when traveling. When on the travel screen, you'll be shown the amount of time it would take to travel to each location. If you run out of time, you have to start the entire chapter over, since the game autosaves every time you travel. This might not seem so bad in the beginning, but in Chapter 5, if you're not careful enough, you'll have to do the whole chapter over. And this one involves having to speak to a few different NPCs at different times, just to get your merchandising network set up. If you fail to meet any of these NPC requirements, you'll lose the chapter. I got so sick of playing this chapter over and over that I looked up a guide online, and there's a few steps that I should have been able to take, but apparently the game didn't let me do it, due to one NPC not being docked to in the right order. Back to traveling. Each planet has slightly different NPCs that you can trade with. Each planet also contains a different set of products. As a general rule of thumb, you'll buy stuff on one planet, travel to another one, sell off what you have, then buy more stuff while you're there to sell on to your next point of interest. As for the trading itself, it's fairly simple. You walk up to a merchant, choose the product you want to buy or sell, and adjust the quantity that you want. Stars next to an item mean that the prices are substantially higher or lower than normal. If the price is colored green, it means it's higher than average, and if it's red, it's opposite. Naturally, in order to succeed at Space Trader, you'll want to buy the stuff that's starred in red and sell it when it's starred in green to make the most profit. One problem with the trading that I've noticed is that when you get down to it, there's really not a large selection of products to trade with. You might get 1 or 2 extra sets of 4 or 5 in every chapter, but in the end, I would hazard a guess of there's only about maybe 40 items total. For a game that's centered on trading, that seems a bit low, doesn't it? Take another trading sim that I love to play, Recettear. This game had hundreds upon hundreds of items that you can find. In fact, I've played Recettear for hours on end and have yet to really find everything. I've played Space Trader for, according to Steam, 7 hours, and I found no more than 50 items. That just doesn't seem right to me. Along with the inventory, the NPCs get reused as well. The same guy who was on Earth in the first chapter might now have relocated in a later chapter. This just seems to be a bit lazy in design to me. Why not have an entirely fresh cast every few chapters? As for the dialogue, it's not horrible, but it's similar to some RPGs where the dialogue is completely irrelevant to the gameplay. To top things off, there will be some voice acting when engaging the NPCs, and it's on par for some of the worst voice acting I've ever heard. I'd even say it might be arguably worse than Revelations 2012. And the acting in that was worse than any B-movie I've ever seen. I'm sorry, but if you don't plan on getting some decent voice actors, then just skip the voice acting altogether. On the plus side though, it is good for at least a laugh for the first few times. While I'm talking about the NPCs, let me touch on the graphical qualities of the game. They're slightly dated from when the game was released in 2008. To give you an idea, Crysis and Elder Scrolls Oblivion were released the year prior. There's something just not right about that. In any case, the environments themselves aren't too bad, although they can be a bit on the bland side in some settlements. However, the NPCs look way off. I'll just show you a few pictures and you can go ahead and judge for yourself. The only other thing to mention about the trading segments is that they are open to a degree. You can walk around the settlement, talking to whomever you wish. There can be items strewn across the map, and you pick them up to claim them for yourself for an easy profit. If you're lazy and don't want to travel the 30 seconds to the other side of the map, there is a fast travel option between traders. Basically, when you hit escape, you can choose the NPC that you want to trade with, and you'll immediately warp to that character. It does save some time for someone who just wants to trade and be done with it. That does it for the trading segments of the game, but we still have the other half to talk about. The bounty hunting. If you find yourself running low on funds, you can opt to talk to a bartender to get a bounty mission. These are done in an FPS style deathmatch, not unlike Unreal Tournament. You start off with 3 lives and a pistol, and need to kill enough enemies to force the boss to appear. When he does, killing him will start the countdown to end the mission. There's more items than you can collect here, and I found that the best time to do all of the bounty segments was after you sell off your current inventory, as you'll be able to immediately sell what you found, so you get the most profit. Anyway, these sections are fun for a little while, but they do start to get stale after replaying them so many times. The biggest problem with it is that there's a very limited amount of content for it. There's possibly 5 maps and only 4 weapons that are available. I understand that the focus of the game is trading, but you do spend quite a bit of time shooting bounties, so a bit more detail could have gone into this section of the game. There are a few flaws with the FPS parts too. First, enemies will often spawn right in front of you. If this happens, chances are you're going to lose a life. It seems like the enemies have set spawn points, but will spawn regardless on whether you're away from it or not. This just seems a bit unfair. Second, there's a weird statement that when you kill the bounty, the game will say he's escaping. The only way I can make any sense of this is that the game's telling you that he's escaping life. Yeah, sure, we'll go with that. The last oddity of the FPS parts of the game is that if you lose all 3 lives, you still obtain the reward. I can't explain that one at all. You'll be able to try it again, and if you fail again, you'll still get the reward again. The thing that also confuses me is that if you're doing bounties or just walking around the colony, no time will pass. So if you try and fail the bounty 10 times, you'll find that no time has passed at all. I guess some parts of Space Trader will just confuse me to the end of time. Bounty hunting isn't the only time you'll have to shoot things. In later chapters when you're traveling, you may run into a space commission that wants to tax your ship. You can opt to either pay the tax or to fight the soldiers. I always opted to shoot the soldiers because it can be very profitable if you're good at it, as the dead enemies will give you a lot more money than bounty areas would. The only problem is that if you fail this challenge, you still have to pay the tax. If you're still looking for more money outside of trading and bounties, there are side missions you can perform for rewards. They're often done in the place of more underground bounties or collecting a certain amount of a particular product, but I often wondered if they were worth it. From my experiences, it seemed as if you spent more time traveling between areas for a pretty shitty reward. So if you were to ask me, I'd say skip the side missions unless you're told that you absolutely need to complete them. A couple more things I want to talk about before I wrap up this review. I found that the game was incredibly choppy at times. I didn't seem to have this problem when shooting bounties, but when in menus, the travel screen, or just talking to NPCs, the game just seemed to get a bit on the unstable side. The mouse would start jumping around, and the game as a whole would just get choppy. I'd estimate that this was a frame rate issue, but why in the parts where there's not much going on? This would have made more sense if it was happening in the bounty hunts, but those were actually smooth. I also thought that perhaps it was my video recorder, but after shutting it off to test it, I found that it wasn't the problem. I never figured it out, and I just assumed that's a fault with the game. Space Trader is also very short. Once you figure out what to do and where to go, it's very possible to complete it in about 2 to 3 hours. I don't know what the game originally retailed for, but I can say that I'm extremely happy I only spent $1 on it. Finally, one last thing that really breaks my heart for a game like this. There is no sandbox mode whatsoever. That right there makes me say, what the fuck? It's a freaking space trading simulation game. Why is there no sandbox mode? There are optional challenge modes, but these are essentially the same thing as the campaign chapters. The challenges only consist of earn this much money in this many days. This is far from an open-ended sandbox mode. I fail to see why this wasn't included. That's all I have. Space Trader Merchant Marine isn't a horrible game by any stretch, but its only redeeming factor that makes it slightly better than mediocre is the fact that it combines space trading with a shooter. It's definitely worth the check out, but I don't think it's going to be really good for replay value. Final score? 6 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.
See you later.